Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 4 articles in this episode for you, and the URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. The first one here is off of RussiaInsider.com, and it says, CIA-linked jihadists take credit for Damascus bomb attacks as Washington runs for cover. On Friday, Washington labeled a jihadist coalition with ties to the CIA as a terrorist organization. Hours later, the jihadist group attacked Damascus. A Syrian alliance of jihadist groups known as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham said on Sunday it was responsible for a double suicide bomb attack in the capital, Damascus, that killed dozens of people, according to Reuters. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Where have we seen this name before? Hours before the Damascus bomb blast, the State Department made a quick, not very publicized announcement. It said, on Friday, the United States officially declared the newly formed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or the HTS, a terrorist group in a written statement. The jihadist coalition consists of al-Nusra and some opposition groups that formerly enjoyed U.S. support, including Harakat Noor al-Din al-Zinki. This terrorist designation comes as a major blow to the armed Syrian opposition, as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is considered the single largest rebel faction in all of Syria. We called it back on Saturday when news broke of the attacks. These were moderate bomb blasts. It also looks like Robert Fisk was right. And he says after splitting with Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra is being presented to the West as moderate force. The jihadist force reputation being cleaned up to suggest it is deserving of CIA support. Previously, despite several rebrandings, al-Nusra has never been able to hide the fact that it has received direct and indirect support from the CIA. By the way, here's how Rutgers ends its report on Sunday, Damascus bomb attacks. It says Hayat Tahrir al-Sham was created from a merger of Jabhat Fetch al-Sham, formerly Al-Qaeda's Nusra Front, and several other groups. The jihadist alliance, which is not linked to Islamic State, includes some of the most hardline rebel elements fighting Assad. See, they're not CIA-linked terrorists, they're hardline rebels. It's a good thing Washington distanced itself from these hardline CIA-linked rebels in just one day before they blew up Damascus. Excellent timing. Next article that I have for you, also off of RussianInsider.com, and it says, U.S. says Russia's condemnation of Damascus bomb attacks unfair to suicide bombers. Russia's Western colleagues at the UN Security Council make it clear that they have a different operating standard with regard to Syria, which is an unqualified denunciation of terrorism. Any questions? The West's response to the deadly twin bomb attacks in Damascus on Saturday continue to shock even the most hardened cynics. In what can only be described as an act of extremely good timing, Washington managed to distance itself from the group that claimed responsibility for the bombings just hours before the attack was carried out. Rutgers then proceeded to portray the suicide bombers and the terrorist organizations they belong to as misunderstood hardline rebels fighting Assad's tyrannical rule. And now there's this. Russia was forced to recall its draft statements of the United Nations Security Council condemning the March 11th terror attacks in Damascus because a number of Western countries tried to change the document's essence, the Russian Foreign Ministry said on Monday. This is a very diplomatic way of saying that Washington and its client states thought that the draft statement was unfair to suicide bombers. Here's a statement from Russian Foreign Ministry that will probably harm your blood pressure. It says, it is regrettable that the Security Council does not always find a common denominator on the Syrian issue. For example, The biased position held by a number of its Western members prevented it from reaching a consensus on a Russian proposed draft press statement denouncing the bloody terrorist attacks in Damascus on March the 11th, which claimed 70 lives, according to the latest reports. Implementing their well-known political directives, they attempted to unjustifiably modify the thrust of the document by including provisions reading as accusations of the Syrian authorities and justification of terrorist actions. In consequence, we had to withdraw the draft. Moreover, during the debate on the text, our Western colleagues made it clear that they had a different operating standard with regard to Syria, which did not imply an unqualified denunciation of terrorism. The consequences of this approach may prove the most unfortunate. At the same time, we believe it is critical that the crime in Damascus was resolutely condemned by the UN Secretary General. Yes, the U.S. and its client states wanted to modify the thrust of the document by providing justification of terrorist actions because the West has a different operating standard with regard to Syria, which does not imply an unqualified denunciation of terrorism. When does al-Nusra get to join the Security Council? They'll fit right in. The next article that I have for you is off of theexpress.co.uk, and it says, Kim Jong-un threatens merciless attack on America in retaliation for South Korean drills. Kim Jong-un has threatened to unleash a merciless attack on America if joint military exercises with South Korea continue. And there is video in this. He said he would attack his Western enemies from ground, air, sea, and underwater in a saber-rattling statement released through state media agency KCNA indicated the bloodthirsty despot was becoming increasingly agitated by the joint military drills south of the border. A statement attributed to Kim said if they infringe on the DPRK's sovereignty and dignity even a bit, its army will launch merciless ultra precision strikes from the ground, air, sea, and underwater. And there's some pictures and stuff in this. If you want to pull it up, take a look at this. It says the latest fiery statement was issued as an aircraft carrier strike group led by the USS Carl Vinson joined South Korea's military forces for exercises. North Korea, which has alarmed its neighbors with 2 nuclear tests and a string of missile launches since last year, said the arrival of the U.S. strike group was part of a reckless scheme to attack it. U.S. Navy spokesman said Carl Vinson was on regular scheduled deployment to the region during which it would take part in exercises with the forces of ally South Korea. Last week, North Korea fired 4 ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan in response to annual U.S.-South Korea military drills, which the North sees as preparation for war. The murder in Malaysia last month of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's estranged half-brother has added a sense of urgency to efforts to handle North Korea. Compounding regional tension, China is vehemently opposed to the deployment in South Korea of an advanced U.S. anti-missile system. Korea say the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense anti-missile system is for defense against North Korea, but China fears its powerful radar can probe deep into its territory and compromise its security. The U.S. began to deploy the system a week ago, a day after North Korea launched its latest 4 missile tests. The next article I have for you is off of barenakedislam.com, and it says, Turkish foreign minister is predicting that a holy war with Islam will soon begin in Europe. Turkey's foreign minister, Mevlut Cavusoglu, and I'm probably butchering that all to the dickens, is the instigator who wanted to stir up the Turkish expat community in Rotterdam at a pro-President Erdogan rally, but who was promptly banned by Dutch government. Dutch police had to use dogs and water cannons to break up the violent protest by Turkish Muslim demonstrators. And the Independent says he's not impressed with the Dutch politicians, and sitting in Ankara sees no discernible difference between the Dutch conservatives, socialists, or far-right Freedom Party, led by Geert Wilders. For the Turks, the re-elected Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, is, for all practical purposes, just as obnoxious as Wilders. President Erdogan himself has gone so far as to say that the Dutch are mere Nazi remnants, which is as offensive as it is a historical, hence the row. The Turkish foreign minister says that we in the West all have the same mentality, continuing, where will you go? Where are you taking Europe? You have begun to collapse Europe. You are dragging Europe into the abyss. Holy wars will soon begin in Europe. This is a real clash of civilizations, a refusal by the West to accept the equality of Muslims and Muslim nations. The Trump travel ban is the most explicit example of this, but it is there, and as an undercurrent in everything from Brexit to Australian neo-Nazism. So that's all I have for you in this episode, but there's much more to follow. If you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up, share it on your social media so everybody gets to enjoy the news. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that. That way you'll stay informed. See you in the next one.